Starship Vigilant, a Star Trek Adventures campaign.
Everyone, and welcome to what I believe is session 49 of Star Trek Vigilant. So tonight we are playing part one of Joy's Soul Lies in the Doing. And can I just go around the virtual table and ask you to introduce yourselves and who you are playing? So who'd like to go first?
I'll go first, I guess. Now that I remember who I am. I am who I am. I'm Kevin, and I am playing David Osterhagen, who is a science officer on the USS Vigilant.
Perfect. And who'd like to jump in next?
I am Sarah Jane, and I play Giara Prox, who is the chief engineer, and she's a Trill.
And I am Mike, and I'm playing Lieutenant Commander Kaz, the ship's first officer.
Wow, that sounded very professional, everyone. Well done. Give yourselves a little round.
How many sessions to get?
49 sessions to get it to sound professional. Well done. 49. Wow, that's a thought, isn't it? I had to check that, and 49 sessions. Yeah, I wish I could say I had some special plans, but so that would take forward planning and organisation, neither of which are skills I possess.
We need to session 69 so we can giggle like teenagers.
I think we'll probably just about get there. Right, so here's where we left things last time. So where we left the crew of the Vigilant, if you recall, the Vigilant was on a shakedown cruise after having undergone refit and repair at Narendra Station, and this shakedown cruise consisted, if you recall, of heading out on manoeuvres. Initially, you went to a star system to basically shoot at some asteroids, and you basically fought some drones, which enabled you to hone your targeting systems. And then, if you recall, you'd then gone to, I believe it was called Uono's Star, which was a pulsar, to carry out basically tests on the sensors. And during that, whilst you were in that location, you, if you recall, detected a transmission, which after some investigation, you were happy that it was artificial in origin and that it was some sort of distress signal. And that distress signal was coming from another star system located fairly close by. And you had decided to go and investigate. You were unable to determine you weren't able to really determine the source of the signal on first investigation, but you set a course to go and investigate. And so when we join the Vigilant, you are approaching the Barlin star system. And if you recall, the distress signal was coming from the vicinity of the moon of Barlin 4, so the fourth planet in that system, which according to your star charts was designated P80-AS in the star catalogue. So we currently pick up the action as the Vigilant is en route to the source of this transmission. Going around the table, so does anyone have anything they would like to be doing at this point, bearing in mind you are en route to render aid in response to a distress signal?
I'm gonna. Sorry, it's gone. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can do any more and localize the source of the distress signal.
Okay. How would you like to do that?
Triangulate it. See if I can work out. So where's it coming from? Is it actually coming from a planetary surface, or is it in orbit?
As far as you can tell from this distance, so bearing in mind you're travelling at warp, and at the moment, all you know is it's coming from the vicinity of the moon of Balin 4. So, as I say, that's a bit of a vague description. I know,
Okay. I'm gonna.
but again, bearing in mind, and sensors, of course, are a funny thing in Star Trek because they do work at very long range.
They're doing exactly what the plot needs.
Essentially, so all you know at the moment is that the distress signal is a it's a distress signal of unknown origin. You don't. So in other words, it's not coming from a known. It's not coming like from a Federation vessel. It's not coming from a known source. All you can tell is because of the nature of the signal, i.e., it's artificial. It's repeating. All you can tell is that it is not naturally occurring. So in other words, it's not being generated. It wasn't like a signal from the pulsar or something like that. It is apparently a distress signal.
It's definitely an artificial signal. It's not.
Yeah. So did you want to try and localize that more? You said you wanted to try and triangulate it.
Or at least sort of like work out a navigational course, bring us in. So I need to know where it is to start with.
Okay, that's fine. So if you want to jump over to Roll20 for me, and what you can do, you can go to your character sheet.
Find it. Where we go, Kaz?
Okay, you can go to your character sheet, and what you can do is you can. I would imagine that's going to be probably an insight and So what specifically are you trying to do? You're trying to find a location?
Yeah, I'm trying to localize the, as I say, try and localize the location of it.
Okay, I'm going to allow you then to use control and con, given that you're specifically you're specifically using, you're trying to find a location. You're not scanning it as such. You're just trying to pin it down.
So
I'm also going to.
Yeah, sorry, I've got astrogation.
So you can also use your astro navigation focus.
Yes.
Right. So do you want to roll that for me? That'd be 2 dice, unless you want to give me any threat, of course.
Choose. Hang on a minute. Focus use, yes. Toss roll 2 dice.
Okay, that looks like 3 successes to me.
Hey!
Right, so what that means is then we are going to... you're going to have generated 2 points of momentum.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a difficulty 1 task. It wasn't, overly complex given the equipment that you've got. And also the ship is also going to roll to assist you. So just if you hold that thought for a minute.
So that's plenty.
Again, obviously the vigilant of... Oh, that's interesting. What's happened to the vigilant character sheet? Oh, that's not good. Bear with. Oh, got it. Okay, so the ship is going to use its sensors and con.
One.
Excuse me. Okay, so that's 1. So you've got a total of 4. So you've now got actually 3 points of momentum. So, okay, so what you are able to determine then from your basic roll success is that you have confirmed that the distress signal is coming from an object in the orbit of the moon of Balin 4.
Yeah.
So now you do have extra momentum. So if you want to spend more of that momentum, you can also get extra information. So there is a momentum spend called Obtain Information, and basically you can use that on a 1-for-1 basis. So at each point of momentum, you can ask a question, and I have to give you a, within reason, truthful answer.
Can can't. It's not another roll for this, is it? I can't get.
No, this is an immediate spend. So you've generated momentum. So and also I'll also open that to the rest of the group. So if anyone else has questions,
Okay.
For that momentum, you can either bank that momentum or you can spend it. And each point of momentum you spend,
Right. So
you can ask a question.
object was in orbit, or it's somewhere between the two planets. Yeah.
Right, it's in the orb. So your first roll, which succeeded, tells you that the object is in the orbit of the moon of Balin 4. So Balin 4 is the planet. The planet has a moon. This object is in the orbit of the moon.
The moon is PA.
So
that's
so
TRS. Yeah, it was like TRS 80. Isn't that an old computer? Wasn't that Texas Instruments computer or something? Or was that TSR?
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
whatever.
um,
Yes, you're right. So the moon only has a designation in star charts. So the moon does not have a name other than the moon of Balin 4. It is designated as TRS 80 on the star charts.
is it
But
giving?
this object, whatever it is in orbit of that moon.
Is it stuff the other guys? Do you wanna spend points on this, or
Yeah, can we ask a question like
Can
what
do.
is the
Can do.
object? Or is that not
Is
a
it,
reasonable question?
is it an artificial object? Is it a
Okay, so
ship?
you lose 1 point of momentum, and you are able to determine from your readings that it is a ship, and it is a ship of an unknown configuration. So, in other words, it does not match anything in the Starfleet database. So, it is not a ship from a known race, although or it is a type of ship from a known race that you've never seen before. So, as I say, that it could be either of those options, but it is definitely a ship, and it is definitely a ship that you have not encountered before, and neither has anyone else in Starfleet.
Got another question, guys, if I can.
Right, so that's another point of momentum. So go for it. So that's 2 points. So you're now down to 1 point of momentum banked.
Yeah. Is it giving off a power source apart from the signal? Is it?
Yes, it is.
Can we tell? Is it antimatter, or is it?
Oh, that sounds like 2 questions to me.
Okay.
No. I'm not going to be. No. It is giving off. It is giving off readings consistent with a shall we say earlier generation warp drive. So it is giving off. It obviously has some sort of matter antimatter system, because all faster than light vessels use a variation on that technology. Every species that you have ever encountered has some variation on that. There are some exceptions, but this is giving off readings which suggest it is a warp capable ship, but it seems to be a more like a less advanced antimatter system.
Have we had any clues from the nature of the distress signal itself as to what race or area the origination it might have originated from?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So as you are as you're on the bridge, I'm assuming Jara's on the bridge as well, and you're because obviously you will have a station on the bridge. As you're approaching, the universal translator is working on the signal. Obviously, the universal translator is a very, very clever piece of technology, and as the audio becomes clearer, so initially you were picking up the signal, you can now pick up the audio, and the audio is clearly a feminine sounding voice to your ears. Obviously that designation may not mean the same thing to another species, but it sounds to all of you, the intonation of the voice sounds more feminine, and as the computer continues to analyze it, and as you get closer, the audio and the voice you begin to get words which are being translated. Basically, the universal translator, keeps crunching away at this transmission, and as you are approaching the system, so as you are literally the Vigilant kind of is probably a few minutes away from the system. The audio comes through clearly, and you hear a feminine voice, and it may be that the computer has interpreted it as a feminine voice. And the audio says, "This is Commander Mouty of the Akaru Explorer Starward. We are in distress and require urgent assistance." And that message continues so it sounds as if it's been put on repeat. This is Commander Mouty of the Akaru Explorer Starward. We require immediate assistance, and it keeps repeating. But as I say, now the Universal Translator has deciphered the language, and so you now hear it as English, basically.
So two things. Osterhander starts shaking and starts mumbling Kobayashi Maru. But is there any degradation in
We are 14 periods out of all
the
36.
Signicate?
We have struck a Rivitic mine.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, oh no, not again. But is there any degradation in the signal? Does digital signatures over a long period of time? Is there degradation of the signal to indicate that it is a year? This signal's been going on for 300 years.
Excellent.
Kind of thing.
Excellent question. So no, it appears that this is a recent message. So obviously, if you recall, when you were in the Uono's star system, i.e., where the pulsar was, and you basically have had your sensors had been tweaked and so on and so on. And so one of the reasons why you've managed to pick this message up is just probably just random chance that the sensors were directed in that direction while you were testing them out. You picked this message up, but as far as you can tell, this message has been sent because you've received it, responded to it, and it's probably taken you a couple of hours to get there because this star system is quite close to where you were. It's not a long way off. It's literally Star Trek distances. It's 2 or 3 hours travel.
Are we
at warp speed? So.
Are we able to check two things? Are we able to check for life signs either on the ship or on the moon? And also whether there are any other
you can do that.
features in the area that indicate that there might be other vessels nearby.
Okay, excellent. All excellent questions. The answer to all of those questions, of course, is yes. So what you can do is, so certainly you can, sensors can. So sorry, those questions again were: are there life signs on the ship and or the moon? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so Osterhagen, why don't you can roll for this? Then you're the sensor guy. So I will get the ship will assist you. Bear in mind you've got 1 point of momentum to spend, but this is only going to be a difficulty 1 task.
So task was 1.
So obviously you roll your two dice, but you only have to achieve 1 success.
Oh yes.
And also the ship will assist you as well because you're using the sensors. So.
Is there anything science? I've just got all that stuff. Okay, so insight and science.
Sure. And what focus have you got? I'm sure you've probably got a focus that would apply. Have you?
Xenobiology.
Have you got sensors or? Yeah, you can do xenobiology. You can do xenobiology because you're looking for life signs. So you can. I'll let you go with xenobiology.
So focus.
Sue me, I'm feeling generous.
Virology, philosophy. I think
xenobiology would apply because you're, again, these presumably the life signs you're looking for may not be life signs you recognise, but again you have knowledge of that. So that's 2 successes, perfect.
Cool.
So I'm going to roll for the ship. Ship gets another success. So so your momentum pool is now back up to 3 because you've got 3 successes in total. You only needed 1 to achieve a result. So you've now got a bank of 3 momentum. So to answer those questions, first of all, so the ship sensors are picking up life signs on both the planet's surface and on the vessel. So the vessel, there is approximately, and this is a very approximate figure, you are estimating that there are somewhere between 60 and 80 life signs on the ship, and on the surface there appears to be 3 life signs, and the life signs are the same type. So both on the surface and on the ship are essentially the same species. However, bearing up what we've said already, this appears to be a new species. So although the life signs are within the sort of standard Star Trek, everyone's got 2 legs, 2 arms, a heart, blah blah blah, respiratory system. So they're humanoid. The life signs appear to be humanoid. In other words, you can pick up all of the electromagnetic signature that you pick up from a normal, from regular life signs. So they seem to be within that parameter, which suggests they are humanoid. But they are the detail is such that they are obviously not a species again that's been encountered before. So that would tell you that this is, and Naismith obviously kind of strokes his chin and says, "Seems like we're looking at a first contact situation here, number one."
Mm.
And sorry, so Joe, what was the other thing? So you asked about the. You were also looking for warp signatures, right? To see if there were any other ships in the system. Is that correct? Okay, so also with that success, I'll take 1 point of momentum off as an additional question. So that means your total is down to 2. So you've got 2 momentum banked, and a scan of the system reveals that there do not appear to be any other indications of warp-capable vessels in the system. So
can we make an engineering scan to see whether the ship's giving out is basically whether it's taking damage, whether it's got fluctuating power supply. You know what I mean? It's sort of like give it a scan to find out whether it's exhibiting damage.
Yeah, you can do that. So Sarah Jane, do you want to do that for me? You can do that. So I tell you, actually, what you can do, let's make it slightly different. I think what you're going to do is you are going to, rather than scan again, you're simply going to use your engineering systems to analyze the data that you've already, because obviously the ship has already done this scan. Osthagen has successfully scanned the ship, the moon, the system. So all you're doing is you're taking that information and you're going to interpret it. You're going to run it through your systems. So I'm going to allow you to, first of all, I'm going to suggest, you can pick the approach, but I would probably go with something like insight and engineering, maybe.
Yep.
I'm going to allow you to take a focus because you've got warp drive as a focus. You've also got electroplasma power system, so both of those would be applicable. So focus is yes. Task roll is 2. Also, looking at your talents, I believe your talents give you. You've got technical expertise. So what that means is if you make any task assisted by the ship's computer or sensors, then you can re-roll 1d20. So because the ship is going to be assisting you with its computers, if you get any, if you want to, you can re-roll one of the d20s to try and get a better result. Does that seem fair?
Do I have to take the result that comes up?
No, so what you do is if you roll your dice first, so roll your 2 dice first. Okay. Let's see what you get, and then you can decide if you get So to be honest, you've got 2 successes there, which is all you need. I'm going to roll for the ship as well, because again the ship's going to use computers and engineering to assist you. I'm going to roll that. Okay. So if you want, you can try and re-roll that 1d20 that failed. It's up to you. You don't need to. It was a one. Your difficulty was 1, so you've succeeded and you've gained 1 point of momentum.
But
if you want, you can. Yeah, you can re-roll that if you want, and then you can that could potentially give you another point of momentum. So shall I re-roll it for you?
Yep.
Because it's you have this. This is your sort of inbuilt talent that you just can. It gives you a chance to try again. So we'll do that again. Oh, okay, so it still failed, but you're no worse off than you were.
At least I know how handsome I am.
So again, there you go. So your momentum pool is now up to 3. And okay, so what exactly was it you wanted to know? You wanted to try and ascertain damage from the readings, basically, right?
Yeah, it was basically we've got a good idea how antimatter warp drive works. Is there anything out of even sort of like from other species and stuff? Is there any sort of like things that are out of kilter or drive? The frequency giving off the engine signatures are giving off the wrong frequencies, that sort of thing.
Okay. Basically, what you do then, Giara, is you do you prefer Giara or Giara? Because I noticed you said Giara, which kind of works for me. But Giara,
to be honest,
we'll
I think I forget from one week to the next. So, but yeah, this week it's Giara.
We'll go with that then. Okay. Or maybe there's two of her. Okay. So you kind of are sitting there at your displays, and you and your team are going through the data. So what you determine is that first thing is you determine that the ship's warp drive is essentially it's equivalent to the warp 5 engine, which is from the TV series Enterprise. For those of you familiar with it, I know some of you may not be, but basically the Enterprise was set around 2156, and it was basically sort of humanity's first moves into sort of a broader space, because they developed the engine that allowed a ship to travel at warp 5, which because the Vigilant can travel at warp 9, which I won't go through all the math of it because I don't really understand it myself, but basically that's significantly faster. So the warp 5 engine was kind of represented humanity's first movement into the sort of interstellar community, because with the warp 5 engine you could reach a nearby star with in a matter of days rather than it being a matter of years. And so your scans initially suggest to you that this ship appears to be, as was suggested from what you picked up earlier, that this would appear to be a kind of a simpler warp drive. And the systems are very familiar to you, because most starfaring races use very similar technology. A warp drive is a warp drive. It kind of, because of the way the physics work and the maths work, they all tend to be similar. And so you recognize all of those elements. But again, your estimate is that this is a simpler version of the warp drive. And again, you estimate it could probably maximum speed is probably warp 5. And you can also tell that what seems to have happened is that it appears that the ship has encountered some sort of graviton event, which ties in with your knowledge of the Shackleton Expanse. And so it seems likely that they may have encountered one of the anomalies, which has basically kind of fried their warp drive, essentially. And all the readings that you're picking up, you can see elevated graviton emissions from the dilithium crystals, or the equivalent. They look like dilithium crystals, which is again a common element in all warp drives. So you can essentially diagnose the problem almost from here, and you can also tell from your readings, from looking at the power distribution from the ship, that they've also suffered some. They've likely suffered casualties, and they've likely suffered additional damage, because you can see where some of the power distribution network has been overloaded. And given the sort of simpler nature of the systems, the ships are less able to handle that kind of event, because the modern ships that you serve on, there are many redundant systems, and so it's likely that this ship has probably taken quite a beating, given what you can tell from, and this is all information that you've derived from your analysis of the sensor readings.
There's nothing that indicates. So we know we know that we don't know what it is. A case that actually we don't know what the ship is. However, the nacelles look to be Klingon, or is it a case that it's possible to tell if elements are derived from another species, so that we could then say actually this group, this mob has been in contact with the Romulans, the Klingons?
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll cut back to the so basically at this point, Giara reports to Naismith, gives a very detailed analysis, and you can see, and Giara can see that yeah, I can see what's that. We know what's happened here. They, these and Captain, these people definitely need assistance. This is not a. This is a. This is a serious situation they're in because if they're in a warp ship, that suggests they are probably a long way from. There's nothing to indicate that they are native to the Barlin star system because Starfleet records, tell you that the Barlin star system is essentially uninhabited. There have been reports of kind of, privateer outposts on some of the moons, but it's essentially there is no indigenous life or intelligent life in that system. So from that you can determine that the ship has presumably come from somewhere else, and that tells you in itself that if obviously if they're a warp ship, then if their warp drive is knackered, then that means they're not going to be able to get home without assistance, because home is likely to be
Long way
several weeks or months or whatever away at warp speed, which means that without assistance they're not going to get home. So she reports that to the captain, and again Naismith kind of gestures you and Osterhagen over, and what are your suggestions, ladies and gentlemen?
So two things. Obviously,
Right.
if we know which way the ship is facing, can we project a line of sight back from that? To kind of, we're going to assume this thing came into the system and broke down. If we follow that line backwards, is there any planets? Is there any system line going back?
What you're looking for is an iron trail or a warp trail.
Or a kind of a direction which we go, actually, these guys are close to.
Yeah. Really silly question.
A
really silly question. Would the line not just go round and round the moon if it's in orbit?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm not saying it was a brilliant idea.
Sorry, no, I thought there was something I was missing.
No. It's not a silly question at all. If the ship was in sort of open space and was, cruising along, then that would make perfect sense. But in this case, the ship seems to have settled into the orbit of this moon. Right. You suspect, in their distress, they may have. You're not sure whether they've gone to use the moon as sanctuary, give them a kind of, that maybe their instinct is to have a planet or something at their back, or whether this is just they've just got caught by the gravitational influence. But for whatever reason, all you can tell is that the ship is orbiting the moon, so therefore you cannot get a directional fix.
So not a stupid question at all. Orbit, not a decaying one.
Again, it seems to be stable at the moment. They're in a high orbit. They're in a kind of they're in a distant orbit rather than a close orbit. So at the moment, there seems to be no danger of them crashing into the planet. And again, your in analysis of their systems from the scans tell you that they do have some power. So they obviously have life support, as far as you can tell, and they have some sort of navigational ability. But essentially, without the warp drive, that only does them so much good. So no, Kevin, not a stupid question at all. But in this case, it's not going to help you because they've been in orbit. So therefore, they're just basically orbiting this moon.
Okay.
So as you're approaching, so at this point, Kaz, your helm console, you're basically going to drop out of warp because you're entering the system. So Naismith orders you to drop out of warp, but keep us at a distance. So he orders you to sort of hold at 2 AUs or something. So which is quite a way off, but I mean obviously well within your sensor range. But it just means you don't drop out of warp on top of them, sort of thing.
Yeah. So I'll drop out and then decelerate to suitable orbital speed.
Right. So the super high, super expensive CG effects show the Vigilant.
But it's a cutscene from the it's a cutscene from the pilot.
Yeah, dropping out. It's reused imagery, dropping out of warp. And yes, you kind of the ship drops to impulse, and you kind of settle down at kind of point. Point. Sort of quarter impulse or something. and Naismith sort of orders the ship to proceed, but with caution. He also orders a yellow alert, purely as a precaution, because obviously, despite everything, there's always, there's always the potential there could be danger that you haven't seen yet. So Kalish orders the ship to yellow alert, and the lights flicker, and people run about aimlessly, and the defensive shields or the defense fields go up, and you're on a slightly heightened state of alert, and the ship, you sort of crawl, or you sort of slowly approach this vessel. So if you want to look at Discord, I'm just going to pop an image up to give you an idea of what this ship looks like. So this is in the STA game chat thing. So hopefully, wait for it. There you go. Can you see that?
Yep.
So if you look in the STA game chat channel, so that is an image of the ship design that you see, and as you can see, it's suffered damage. And again, this is the ship in orbit of
kind of full thrust. It sort of looks like those full thrust ships.
Yes, it does. And the design elements. So to answer your earlier question, Kevin, which again was a very good question, although it has certain elements which are aligned even with Federation design, so i.e. saucer section, kind of at the front there, and it has separate nacelles. But again, going back to the nature of how warp drive works, warp drive operates on kind of well-established physics guidelines. So, in other words, every species pretty much knows to keep warp nacelles away from the body of the ship. That's a design which is echoed in every species vessel, with the exception of the Romulans, because the Romulans use a slightly different form of power for their ships. But I mean, Klingons, Federation, everybody pretty much tends to build a ship like this, which has the nacelles are separate. Even the Vigilant has its nacelles, although the nacelles are within a covering. Within that covering, the nacelles are still isolated from the rest of the vessel. And the saucer section thing at the front again.
In the same way, wagons, if you go to around the world, wagons will kind of look the same.
Exactly.
Even though totally different species. Yeah, I see that.
Because form follows function. So for a warp drive to operate, you need to create a warp field, and to create a warp field, you need to have multiple generating points. So the nacelles, generally 2 is the most efficient, but you can have 3 or 4 or 6 or whatever, and that creates the warp field. It makes sense to have the nacelles separate from the main body of the ship, because if something goes wrong, they can be ejected. And if you also make sense to keep your habitation area away from your engineering spaces. So again, saucer section thing at the front, kind of fits with that. So again, to answer your question specifically, it looks recognizable as a warp ship, but it doesn't look like any species vessel that you've encountered before. And obviously, you're a Vulcan and a science officer, so your knowledge of these things is pretty unassailable. But everyone around the bridge agrees that this looks like the design is recognizable, but it's not familiar. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So you're approaching, and as you approach, the operations officer kind of turns to Naismith and says, "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the ship."
On screen.
And you can hear the console sort of beep, beep. They're obviously hailing you. So Naismith says, put it on speakers, and the message comes through. And again, you recognise the same voice, the same feminine-sounding voice, which has been, again, it's been interpreted by the ship's universal translator. As this message said, the voice sounds slightly confused initially, because she says, I can understand your recognition signal. Incredible. My name is Commander Mouty of the Akaru Explorer Starward. We encountered a gravitation wave which has caused our propulsion systems and some of our primary shielding to fail. Most of my technical crew died in the initial impact. We are adrift and require immediate assistance. Thank the Uryaks for guiding you to us. Are you able to render assistance? And Naismith kind of mutes the signal and again, looks round at you. And he says, I'm inclined to proceed with this as a first contact situation, number one. And ladies and gentlemen, are we all in agreement?
I agree.
Yep. So the universe translator is translating their speech to ours.
Correct. And it will also translate your speech to theirs.
Is it? Again, it transfers back. But can we kind of look at the speech and go, well, actually, it looks like it's ancient Celtic, or it looks like it's ancient.
Yeah, that's
is it a derivative?
A reasonable question.
Kind of think.
Okay, so you can easily. Your computer will. That's the question. The computer easily tells you that again. This is not a language that it recognises, other than again. I don't want to get into the whole notion of parallel evolution, and in Star Trek in particular, there's this concept of the preservers. A species who seeded planets with very similar life forms, which is why it's the in-universe explanation for why everyone's got knobbly foreheads, and because the idea is that everyone was that there was an ancient species that went round kind of dropping DNA onto planets, and so everybody who evolved tended to evolve along similar lines, which is why most people have got 2 legs, 2 arms. Nothing to do with the fact there's an actor beneath makeup. It's all to do with so what I'm getting at is that the language shows, again, this is how the universal translator works. It's able to analyze the semantics, analyze the commonalities in the language, and it's super science, but basically the language is not one that you've come across before specifically. So again, it's it's able to be translated, and the translator is quite happy translating it. It will translate your language back to them, and also communicators. So when you, again, for those of you not familiar, that in the universe, the idea is that the comm badge that you wear also has the universal translator built into it, which is why people can speak to each other. So even if you were to go to their ship or they were to come to you, you could still converse with them because the communicator acts as a translator. So technically, you'd be hearing them speak in their language, but then you'd hear the translator's voice kind of over the top of it, translating it. Obviously, on the show, they don't do that because that would be confusing to people, but that's how it's meant to work. Is that right, Mike?
Yes.
Mike, have I got that?
Yep, sounds about right. It'd also be very, thinking about it, it would also be very confusing, you say, because if you imagine what it's like talking with feedback. Then
or if you have somebody, if you watch anything from like the UN where they have people translating and you hear the person speaking in German and then they have a kind of a slightly toneless voice over the top of it, which is the translator kind of.
Just answer the question.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it works. But obviously in Star Trek, it's a clever way of getting around the fact that you don't want everybody to be speaking in different languages. So. Yeah. So anyway, she basically repeats that message, and obviously Naismith is just taking a pause because obviously you're committing to a course of action here, which has to be handled carefully. But assuming all of you are in agreement, he turns to the operations officer, says, "Okay, open the channel," and he says, "Greetings. I am. My name is Niles Naismith. I am the commanding officer of the Starship Vigilant. We are representatives of the United Federation of Planets, which is a conglomeration of planetary systems aligned in the interests of peace and common exploration and benefit. We will be pleased to provide you with assistance." And he kind of goes, he has a kind of an official speech that he has to give. And within a few moments, the Vigilant then pulls up alongside this other ship, and the Vigilant is probably about the size of that saucer section. If you imagine that saucer section, the Vigilant is about that size. So you're because of course the Vigilant is smaller than most things. Although the Vigilant is like 150 meters long. So this ship is not, it's not, small, but again, that some of that comes from the fact that it's more rudimentary. So some of the systems it has on board are bigger, so that
Steve,
the engineering spaces are bigger. So not a surprise.
Steve, as we come in,
Yep.
I just want to run a quick, because you said there were 3 lifetimes down on the planet,
Yes.
and I just want to run a quick scan to see whether I can detect shuttle or something like that, a shuttlecraft or something.
Right. There's also another task I'm going to need you to do in a moment, but let's do that first. So, do you want to, if you want to roll for that, then? So again, that will be insight, science. The ship will assist you with sensors.
Insight and science. It's assist ships.
I'll do the ship. You worry about just making your
Right,
roll.
so there's no
You haven't got any focuses to assist you, I don't think.
only helm operation, but I don't think that's really applicable.
No, not relevant.
Okay, so
So you're just going to make two. It's a difficulty 1 task. It's not massively difficult. Okay.
00.
Right. So do you want to spend a point of momentum to re-roll that? Because you have got 3 points of momentum
Yeah,
still in
well,
your
Yeah, go on.
pool, remember? Yeah, go on then. Spoil yourself. Treat yourself.
Well, I've
So just re-roll that again. There you go.
got a 1.
So you got 1 success. The ship is going to then assist you with sensors and science. Does not succeed. So you get 1 success though, which is enough. So your momentum pool is down to 2. And you can see from your sensor scan that the vessel on the surface is what appears to be a rudimentary shuttlecraft.
I was more interested about there actually being a vessel on the shuttle because
Yes, it is basically, it looks like a shuttle pod or a kind of a lunar lander.
because that probably means that they don't have transporters.
Correct. It looks again, it looks very much like a shuttle pod from Enterprise. So it's a shuttlecraft. It's an auxiliary
I
vessel.
was more interested.
It looks like it's only big enough to hold probably a crew of 3 or 4. It's quite basic. It's got chemical. It's got chemical impulse engines, and it doesn't have any. There's no sign of it having warp drive or anything. So it's basically a planetary lander.
I was more interested about the fact that they've gone down in a shuttle rather than because it tells you then they probably haven't got transporters.
As far as you can tell, that's correct. So they have a shuttlecraft. There's no indication of transporters being used, and you can determine the life signs on the planet seem to be okay at the moment. There's no indication of them being in any immediate danger. The planet is the moon, I should say, rather, is.
Has it got an atmosphere?
It's got a basic atmosphere, so they're probably in environment suits. It's pretty. The atmosphere is pretty shitty. Think about the planet in Alien. The kind of it's like wind and high wind and sort of it's pretty miserable. But it's not. They're probably wearing environment suits for comfort rather than survival. If that makes sense. Right. Anyway, so as you approach, again, there is a right. So what you need to do, Kaz is going to need to make a roll to be able to navigate through the gravimetric field, because as you've approached, you can tell from, remember, your augmented sensors that you guys have rigged up in the past.
We've also got that.
You have a bonus of 1 basically to your because you've been able to detect what these things look like. And as you're scanning, you can see that the ship is the other ship is still caught in the fringes of this like gravimetric disturbance. So you can basically plot a course through it to get the Vigilant alongside safely.
Would we be able to log on latch on a tractor beam and pull them clear of the?
I mean, you can. I mean, Naismith hasn't ordered that yet, and if you want to do that, you can. But you also might want to kind of make contact with them first and just get a better understanding of their.
Just that as an option. But,
okay,
so
that's perfectly fine. So if you want to roll, I would say control and con. It's difficulty 2, but it's going to be difficulty 1 because you have that bonus.
Okay.
The ship will assist you with again sensors and sensors and con. Actually, the ship will assist you.
I'll get home operation out of that, so I'll use that as a.
Yeah. So do you want to make a roll for that? And so difficulty 1.
Right, task roll. What will that get? 1.
Perfect. So you got 1 success. The ship's going to assist you.
Why is that 0 different colour?
It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Right, there you go. The ship got 2 successes.
3 in total.
Which is interesting because it only rolls 1 dice, but it must have rolled. Basically, it must have rolled like a 1.
Yeah.
Or it gets focus because don't forget the ship gets a focus.
Yeah.
So it must have rolled less than a 3. Anyway, the point is you've got 3 successes. So your momentum pool has gone up to 4, and you successfully bring the ship in alongside the Star Ward, as they called it.
My youth flourish.
Yeah, and basically the Vigilant kind of you do like a barrel roll. Thank you, Kevin. Into position, and you pull up alongside this ship, and a few nudges of the navigational thrusters. You kind of park it alongside station keeping, and right. So basically, there is a flurry of activity, and blah 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 blah. Let me just see if there's anything important. Okay. So, right. So you pulled up alongside. So what do you want to do now? So again, I know Naismith is technically the captain, but obviously you lot are in charge. So how do you want to handle this?
First off, I'll get a engineering team, repair team, or specialists ready to offer assistance.
Right.
They're with full.
Second off, we need
biohazard just in case.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that is sensible.
Second off, we need
taking my hobnobs with me.
Hobnob.
Hobnobs.
Cosmic hobnob.
We come in peace. Have a hobnob. Oh.
How will it be? Hobnob will be the greatest offence that you can say to these people.
Probably.
Hobnob. You blasphemers!
What do you think they prefer, a rich tea or something?
Probably, yeah.
I know, horror of horrors.
Second off, we need to talk to. We're parked up next to this guy now. We need to talk to the captain again.
Okay, so I mean, I guess the question is: do you want to? Do you just want to transport over? Do you want to keep transport as a secret and use a shuttlecraft to go over? Do you want to get them to shuttle over to the Vigilant? How do you want to handle it?
I would.
I mean, I suppose the first thing you can do is you can probably hail them on the view. I suppose we're probably getting ahead of ourselves. I suppose the first thing is probably just hail them on the view screen.
Yeah, we need to talk to them. So.
Okay, so if you want to have a look in, go back to the Discord again. I'm just going to put up a picture of what these guys look like because I prepared a picture earlier.
Blue piece.
So if you just bear with me a moment.
It's one I made earlier.
Well, okay, I'm going to pin that. There you go.
Okay.
So this is what a member of the species who have identified themselves as Akaru look like. So as you can see, as we said, humanoid, clearly humanoid.
Vulcanish eye, I think.
I don't think they have. Vulcan ears or anything. It might. It's just a picture.
It's the eyebrow, the way the eyebrows are going. They're sort of like.
But they look. I mean, they look. Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could, in theory, be Vulcanoid, I suppose. Oh, hello. What happened there? Is that bloody Craig just stopped recording?
No. Oh, it might be.
Hang on. I'm just going to open up Discord. Bear with. Get rid of that picture. Oh no.
Not sure what
Still
happened.
recording?
Yeah, no, I'm still here. It's just I dropped out. Sorry.
Oh, you dropped out. Okay. We had a bit of a weird noise there. We thought Craig had stopped recording, but it was just you dropping
It's me dropping out. Hit the wrong button.
Okay, so that's what they look like. So on the view screen, this is Commander. What did we say her name was? Commander Mouty. So that's essentially. So she kind of obviously you can see her people, and again you can clearly see male and female. They look very similar, and they're sort of you can see her people kind of looking with interest because obviously you have two-way visual communication. Obviously Naismith is humanoid, but of course on the bridge you've got Kaz, who is clearly not the same species, as well as Giara is obviously Trilla. It's a bit harder to you look humanoid from a distance, and obviously same with Vulcans. But certainly having a Cation on the bridge, obviously you can see the sort of look of kind of. I'd say it's fair to say probably delight. So it's not fear. It's the kind of, this is obviously a big deal for them as well. Given that you are, this ship is the first. One would assume is the first.
She's doing what we're doing.
Yeah, essentially they're exploring. Certainly, at least as far as you can tell, from this information, this is exactly, as you say, exactly what you are doing. You are exploring. They are exploring, and they are, they're kind of delighted by this, and there's much excitement from them. And after a moment, she sort of calms her people down and says, "Captain Naismith, I wish to offer you, joy and friendship from the people of Akaru. This is a monumental day for us, as you are the first vessel from another intelligence that we have encountered. We have seen evidence of other species, but you are the first that we have met, and we are." We are humbled and delighted, and we thank you for your offer of assistance. She says, are you able to assist us with our engineering difficulties? We have wounded on board. We have lost some of our crewmates were lost in the initial situation. And we would value any assistance you can offer us.
I'm sort of butt in, but I said, are your crew shipmates planet side? Do they require assistance or not?
And she pauses a moment because again, talking to a giant cat.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether they have cats, but obviously you're clearly different. But she says. She says, "I thank you for your query. Our crewmates on the surface were there on an exploratory mission, as we had found what appeared to be the ruins of an outpost of some sort on the moon's surface. They had landed in our shuttlecraft to investigate when we were hit by the gravitational anomaly. So at the moment, they are safe. They have sufficient life support and supplies. But we suggested that they remain on the surface so that they did not fall foul of the same incident which occurred to us. Obviously, the shuttlecraft is far more fragile than the Star Wars."
Okay. That's all I was on.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that they weren't stuck down there. So
Naismith. Naismith says, "One moment, Commander. We are a small vessel. However, we will obviously offer all of our resources to assist you. Commander Prux, who is my chief engineer," and he gestures at Giara. "Commander Prux will bring a team over to assist you with your engineering difficulties, and we will be willing to provide medical assistance. I will also have a medical officer, or a couple of my medical staff will also accompany the commander to render whatever assistance they can. Our medical facilities are limited on the Vigilant, however, they may be of more sophistication than yours, and so we will do what we can to assist. And Commander Mouty sort of, nods and says, "Thank you, Commander. Thank you, Captain. Thank you." She goes, I cannot comprehend this wondrous device that allows us to communicate. I know that you are speaking in a different language, and yet I am hearing you quite clearly in Akaru. It's most fascinating. Anyway, we stand ready to receive you. The shuttle bay will be prepped for your arrival. So again, that little hint suggests that they do not have...
Should we send some redcoats in? Just
you can do. I mean, it's really up to you how you. It's really up to you how you want to handle it. As I said, interestingly, it suggests that they again do not have a transporter because they their first reaction is to offer you that the shuttle bay is you can come over to the shuttle bay. So
let's not show all our cards. Let's go use the shuttle bay rather than transport out.
Fine.
Just in.
Do you want to use the runabout because the runabout
will probably be a little bit too big to get in their shuttle bay.
No, actually, the runabout. I mean, you can scan, and the runabout will fit because they have their shuttle bay is actually quite large. Because again, this ship is, I want to say it's not an older type. Doesn't make sense because for them it's brand new, but its design principles are kind of simpler. So its shuttle bay seems to, from what you can tell, the shuttle bay. And again, you've easily been able to. Kalish has already made a schematic scan because your sensors are way more advanced than theirs.
Yeah.
And so she's already got kind of a layout of the ship up on the tactical display.
Is it armed?
And you can clearly see it is armed, but it seems to be armed with kind of like chemical rocket weapons, if you like.
Okay.
So it doesn't, as far as you can tell, it doesn't appear to have any energy weapons. It has like seeking missiles, basically. So you can see that it's got missile racks, basically. Yeah. It has. It does seem to have some sort of laser array, but you suspect that's probably more for communication and targeting.
Yeah.
So like laser painting rather than it being a weapon system, because it's a very, very low yield. And thank you for pointing that out, because obviously the first thing Kalish has done is do a tactical threat analysis. And this ship is, despite its size and it is bigger, but it's certainly, you wouldn't have any trouble offing it at all.
I'm assuming it's just got very basic shielding, sort of like navigation.
Yeah, it does have shielding, but the shielding seems to be primarily designed for navigational shielding. So again, because when you're traveling at high warp speed or high, faster than light speeds, if you run into a pebble, it's going to mess you up. So the first system that faster than light ships, tend to come up with is some sort of navigational deflector, and then the technology inevitably leads to protective shielding. So it does have basic shielding, but again, probably one burst from a phaser bank would punch a hole through that pretty easily. So as I say, it doesn't appear to pose any threat. The shuttle bay seems to be combination shuttle bay and cargo bay. So it's in the rear section of that ship, and it's on the back end basically. So yes, you can easily or comfortably land the runabout in the bay if you like. I only suggest the runabout because it's bigger, and obviously the runabout is also armed as well. So it's really up to you what you want to do. You can take a shuttle clock because you have the smaller Type 7 shuttles, but assuming Giara's going to take a few of her engineering people, you're going to take a few or a couple of the medical stuff. Obviously, I think you've only got 4 medical people, but I'm going to assume Dr. Plume and probably 2 of the nurses will go with him.
The thing is, we could actually turn the rear of the shuttle, the habitat section at the back, into a triage section.
Or in the runabout. Yeah. So do you all agree? Are you going to take the runabout?
Yeah.
Awesome, because we don't get to use the runabout that often, so that's cool. All right, then, so we'll assume then we'll skip ahead a bit, and basically a few minutes later, or 10, 15 minutes later, your various teams assemble in the shuttle bay. So, Giara, I'm assuming you take, probably take McHugh with you, and let's say you take sort of 4 engineers you just grab a few engineers with you, and they all come with engineering toolkits and tricorders and all that
I'm not
stuff.
going. I'm going to register. I'm not going.
Right, Kaz, are you going to fly the runabout?
Yeah. Oh, nobody flies my bird but me.
Obviously, Naismith is going to stay on the Vigilant. And obviously, for the sake of ease, Kalisha's going to stay on the Vigilant, but she sends 2 security people with you as well. And they're armed discreetly with phaser
Mr.
ones.
Osterhagen, would you care to join us? But you will leave your phaser behind.
Obviously, I'm not.
He's not going to leave it behind, is
I
he?
know he's not. It's always the time.
I'll make a show. I'll make a show going. Absolutely. I'll let me just go back to my. I'll put it. Yes, I'll put it away.
I'll just go and put it
This
back.
is a totally new DNA pool to draw from, isn't it?
Yeah. This is not the phaser you're looking for. Go back your way.
So basically you right. So you all gather your stuff, and again you basically pile onto the runabout. And despite I know what Osterhagen said about taking care, but we're gonna assume that you've scanned their environment, their atmosphere is good. It's all you can take. It's all good. There's no immediate or obvious health risks or associated with it. So you don't really need to go on board in environment suits or anything. You can easily scan the atmosphere and everything before you go on board, and it all seems perfectly fine. And so we cut to an outside of the Vigilant, and on the underside of the Vigilant, the kind of you can, as we know, the runabout kind of sits sort of in the bottom of the Vigilant. You can see the bottom of it sort of sticking out, and the kind of restraining ports pull back, and the runabout kind of drops gracefully out, and you bank it over. And I mean, this ship is only a few 100 meters away from the Vigilant, so you're not, you parked it quite close. But the runabout kind of, gracefully flies across to the starward, and as you approach the back, there are kind of old school hangar bay doors, clamshell doors, kind of come apart, and you can see that there's no force field holding in the atmosphere, so they have to vent the bay, and then they have to repressurize it. So you fly the runabout in, and as you land, you see that there's another shuttlecraft parked, which is your scans will tell you is the same as identical to the one that's on the surface, and it looks like it looks very much like a shuttle pod. It's a kind of like a cylinder with a couple of engine clusters on the back and landing legs, and kind of darkened windows, but it's pretty basic looking. And the runabout obviously is probably 2 to 3 times bigger, because the runabout's runabout's like 20 meters in length, isn't it? It's quite a big.
Yeah, it's fairly large.
Runabout's quite a big ship. It's pretty big. So the runabout comes. You come in the runabout, and the runabout, you land it, and your sensors tell you that the clamshell doors have been closed, and you wait for a couple of minutes while the atmosphere is pressurized, because you can as the air comes back into the bay, you can hear the like air processors kind of pumping air into the room, so it gets noisier as the pressure builds. And after a minute or two, you see there's a door on the side of the bay. It opens, and a welcoming committee come into the bay. So obviously that tells you that the atmosphere is okay. Right, Kaz, you're sort of in charge here. So how do you want to handle this?
Okay. I'll wait until I get indications that the hangar deck is pressurized. Then I'm going to take a sensor reading of the atmosphere composition.
Yeah, and I'm sure Osterhagen will do the same, but you don't need to roll for that. Yeah. I can tell you that it is perfectly safe. Trust me, it's perfectly safe.
Trust you until we start. Anyway,
until you look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall, with your eyes popping out. God, I hate that film.
Anyway,
sorry, carry on.
No, I crack the seals on the hatch and open the door, and then we sort of like process out. Anyway, we exit the ship, And
I'm going to assume that you are all, unless you tell me otherwise, that you are all carrying a phaser 1, which is the discrete,
little keychain one.
the little phaser that's tucked away in a little pocket.
Yeah.
So it's the little they call it the keychain phaser.
Yes.
The 2 security guards are wearing proper sidearms because Kalish insisted. So they have phasers in holsters, but the rest of you, I'm going to assume, do have weapons. Or I will assume that Dr. Plume and his people are not carrying any sort of weapon. But it is standard procedure for you to have a phaser 1 just because, it's sensible.
Yeah.
Okay, so and you come out, you'll come out, and I guess get the formalities over with. So you're greeted by
just go out and basically wait until they come and make themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you're greeted by Commander Mouty, and she, you've seen her on the view screen. She's attractive woman. Again, and but she's obviously in command of her of her ship, so she has a commanding presence, and her people are kind of lined up, to welcome you, and there's an exchange of greetings, and I guess probably somebody tries a handshake and they kind of look at you a bit oddly, but then when they get the hang of it, they go, and there's a bit of that going on. It's a bit, it's a bit landing on, it's a bit sort of landing on, Fiji, that kind of thing, where there's a bit of confusion about what to do. But again, the universal translators that you are wearing function flawlessly. You're all wearing communicator badges, and again, she expresses her delight at the technology that allows you to communicate so easily, because they were afraid, obviously, if they did meet other intelligent species, that they would not be able to communicate. So she's delighted by that. And after a few minutes of formality, and you introduce everybody within reason. So you introduce, this is Commander Prux, who's our chief engineer. These are her team. This is Lieutenant Osterhagen, who's our chief scientific officer. And she again kind of notes your ears, Osterhagen, and she sort of says, and what species are you? And, you can go down that road if you like. And she's particularly interested in Kaz, because, again, Kaz is the most obviously alien of the group. And obviously her people have a hard time keeping their eyes off you because, again, they're not sure what first contact would look like, but they're not entirely convinced it would look like this, which is, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, and unless you have anything in particular that you want to do, after the sort of immediate formalities are done, she says, "Look, I would be grateful. My people will show your people where we need assistance, and so assuming that you're happy, then her ship's engineer, or one of her remaining engineers, because and the guy who takes over the engineering, who's introduced as an engineer, he's obviously a junior engineer, and he's kind of his uniform is kind of blackened and torn up, and they've obviously been through a rough time of it. And as you're taken into the ship, Giara, to go to engineering, which again, it's the ship has obviously taken quite a pounding, and similarly the medical team are taken off to the equivalent of sick bay, and you go about your business. Now, Osterhagen, what would you like to do, because you don't have a particular kind of, I mean, obviously engineering and medical people will be put to work.
I do have xenobiology, genetics, virology.
Yep.
So what I'm essentially going to be doing is visually, almost like a psychology role, but visually looking at these guys, the way they carry themselves, and the way
That's perfect. Yeah, that's a good idea.
the way they interact with people, to kind of so they didn't know about handshakes, were a bit confused with the humanoid cat.
Try and get
See
an
if there's
idea
anything
on their
obvious.
body language.
Yeah, so if you go, actually, when he raises his eyebrows, he's angry. When they do this, that, so it's just kind of have an understanding of that. So really sit in the background and observe.
Okay, perfect. Now that is absolutely a good plan, and that is perfectly suited to your skill set.
And get as much DNA as I can, basically, obviously.
Okay, so let me give you
Right.
a few early observations then that you make in your first interactions with them. So the first thing is they are obviously bipedal. They're obviously mammals. Now, given what Mike had said earlier, as you interact with them a bit more closely, you do see that they do actually have some Vulcanoid tendencies. So you can see, for example, that their ears are actually very slightly pointed. So that would suggest to you that they are probably have some shared ancestry with Romulans and Vulcans. But you do notice also that their eyes seem a bit further apart, so their faces look a bit flatter. Because whereas Vulcans and Romulans tend to have, or Vulcans in particular, tend to have quite thin, quite long faces, whereas Romulans tend to look more human-like, but still with the pointed ears and the really bad haircuts. And these guys are again slightly Vulcanoid, slightly tapering ears, slightly pointed eyebrows. But again, their eyes seem a little bit further apart, so that again they don't. You notice all this pretty. You all notice this pretty easily. Osterhagen, you also notice that they have. You can see what looks like the vestigial webbed fingers. So you don't know whether that's toes as well, but on their fingers you can see there's very slight vestigial webbing between their fingers, which suggests at some point in their kind of history they were possibly either amphibious or aquatic. So these are all obvious things that you pick up just physical. And the commander sort of talks to you, Osterhagen, as well, because again, once she sees you more closely, obviously there are some physical similarities between you. So she sort of asks about your species, and again, I leave it up to you to determine how much you do or don't. Exactly.
Generalize and try not to give away any secrets in terms of nerve pinch and whatnot.
Of course. One thing that's come
what I
up.
will do is I will touch on the mythology of the Vulcans to see if we share a common mythology.
Mentioned the
If that's a
Eliax,
thing.
didn't she?
Okay, so
She
say again?
mentioned the Eliax. She said, "Thank the Eliax." Big time.
Yeah, she did. Very well done. Very well done for picking up on that.
Yeah. So
She mentioned. You're right. She did. So if you question her on the Iliacs is basically from what you can determine without it's Iayax, or I think I pronounced it wrong. It's spelled Iryax, and you get the impression that this is their sort of global leader as well as being somewhat of a religious icon. So
okay.
I mean, this is a person. It is not a deity. But from your dealings, quite often you hear that expression. Thank the earyax. It's not earwax. That's what I thought when I first heard it. Earyax. You kind of get this. They get this quite a lot. So as Sarah Jane rightly said, in conversation, so instead of it being thank God or whatever, it's blessings from the earyax for this and this. You all pick up on this in greater or lesser degree as you're working with them. So yes, Osterhagen kind of, as you say, you kind of just circle about observing their behaviour, and Jari, you and your people are thrown into the deep end a little bit. So you follow the engineer whose name is Carl, spelt I think Kaal, or Cal. And he again confirms to you that he was a junior engineer, and he wasn't in the engineering room when the gravimetric disturbance hit, so he was one of the few survivors of the engineering staff, and he takes you down to the engineering spaces, and this looks much more like a kind of like an ocean liner type thing. It's a much more crude space than you're used to on a Starfleet vessel. The antimatter reaction chamber, much like the one on Enterprise, is it's horizontal rather than vertical. So it's a a kind of a large assembly in the middle of this big chamber. There are various, connections coming off it, and you recognise pretty easily the function of most of this stuff because, again, there are underlying physics principles which govern how these things work.
That it's stable and not imminently about to blow.
That's a really good question. Yes, that's a good. You prioritise. That's a good. Okay, so why don't you pull out an engineering tricorder? You don't need to roll for this because, again, your technology is sufficiently beyond theirs that the engineering tricorder and your people kind of scatter and they're taking readings and again these the Akaru who are sort of there to assist you and to to guide you in what you're doing. They're all fascinated by this gadget because, again, whereas you assume they have some sort of diagnostic scanners and that kind of thing. Obviously, the tricorder is a very versatile tool. So you get your tricorder out, you're sort of scanning it, and you can determine that the antimatter reaction chamber is intact. The containment is stable. What seems to have been more the problem is that the gravimetric interference messed with the sort of power distribution system. So the antimatter reaction is still viable, but basically the engine is not being able to deliver power efficiently to other systems. And as mentioned earlier, when this thing hit, because their power relays are more crude, a lot of these just basically blew out, and that's what caused most of the damage and the casualties. So you pretty quickly are able to determine it will probably take you, a few hours of work to restore function, because basically what you're going to do is you're going to replicate more efficient, safer sort of cabling and conduits and stuff, and you can patch up where their own systems have failed. You can patch them up. So it's going to be fairly simple work, but it's just going to take a bit of time.
I'm okay to do that, am I?
And again, you can check with Kaz, but Naismith has basically. Yes, it's a good question. Naismith has offered support, and you probably would check with Kaz just to make sure that you're not breaking any rules. But no, you're fine to do that because ultimately they already have this technology. You're not showing them the replicators. You're just going to you'll just take scans of the affected components, and you can send the schematics back to the Vigilant, and then your engineering people can run the replicators and can create parts for you relatively quickly. And if you're more comfortable, you can kind of fudge the conversation a little bit. So if there's, how are you managing to make these things? You say, well, we just have this, technology that we can, you don't have to go into specifics. And to be fair, they don't push. They are curious. One of the things you notice about these people is, I guess it's just a question of they're just grateful that you're helping them, and obviously they're curious about how how you are able to almost conjure things out of thin air, and obviously what you also might want to do is check with Kaz about how you're going to handle getting these parts over, because of course you've made a decision so far to not reveal the transporters. So it might be a case that you just get them, just get a shuttle pods to bring them over.
Beam them over and beam them into the runabout.
You could do that, if you want. That's fine. You could do that. It's really up to you. Again, it's really up to you how you handle that. That's perfectly fine. You can absolutely do that. You can just, exactly. You just get them beamed over to the runabout, and then one of your team comes back with an armful of bits and bobs from the runabout. And it becomes apparent to you that give it sort of 6 or 7 hours, you'll probably have most of the damage to the propulsion system repaired, at least to a workable level. It's going to have to this ship is going to have to go into its equivalent of home port to be properly fit, properly repaired. But also structurally, there's no massive structural damage. There's no major, again, you can handle most of the repairs that you need to handle to make the ship able to travel, I guess, is the important thing.
Yep. Oh,
Okay,
Get on with that.
right. So you guys go about your business, and as I say, Jara and her team are working efficiently as always. And meanwhile, down in their medical centre, they're about they lost about 20 of their crew, were killed, unfortunately, during the initial incident, and there are probably, as we said earlier, the crew of this vessel is about 75, I think was the number of it's the official number, and sort of 20 of those were killed, and there's probably another 20 who are injured to greater or lesser degree. So Plume and his team efficiently kind of go through and do what they can for them. Again, 24th century technology means they can easily repair broken bones and that kind of thing. And so within an hour or two, all of the injured have been attended to. So Kaz and Osterhagen. So Osterhagen, we've already established, is sort of just watching, and kind of looking around, just getting the feel for what's going on. So Kaz, how are you spending your time?
I just basically sort of like overseeing the others are doing and batting up. Batting up was the wrong word. Making conversation with the captain of the ship or whatever. Don't recall names. Do you know what I mean? Just
right.
Schmoozing.
Commander Mouty.
Yeah. Basically, I'll just get into a conversation with her.
Okay, that's fine. You can do that. Well, she in that case, then she takes you and Osterhagen off to a mess hall, basically. Yeah. She sort of says, well, because she can't do much, because obviously this is a technical problem. So your people and her people are off doing their thing. Yeah. And so she says, well, and she takes you. You go off to what looks like an officer's mess or something.
Give her I'll give her the abbreviated visitors description of the Federation and basically.
Of course, yeah.
What our ideals are, and
surely there would be almost a script of what you tell people.
Yeah,
there's a pamphlet.
Yeah.
But no, there is. I mean, again, a lot of it is, so there is. And so basically what you tell them that, as Naismith said in his opening spiel, the Federation is a political entity. It's composed of about, I think it was 150 member planets at this point. You don't go into too much specifics. You don't give them locations of where, you just say that the Federation spans, a quadrant of the galaxy, and these are all concepts they sort of understand, because again, to be able to get to where they've got to, there are common concepts and things. So they understand the Milky Way galaxy. So if you tell them that the Federation is approximately covers about a quarter of the Milky Way galaxy, or in its in its location, because in Star Trek, you divide the galaxy into quadrants. So you say the Federation is, and they're kind of ooh, because their own influence. She tells you over the course of drinks, she offers you like a kind of a fruit juice, which of course you scan it. No, it's fine. You scan it obviously to make sure it's not harmful, and it's it's pleasant enough. It tastes like a sort of like a grapefruit juice or something. It's not alcoholic or anything. It's just it's just like a formality. And she offers you bits of nibbles. You probably turn your nose up at the food, to be honest, but it's all edible. It's just that occasions. Yeah, occasions have a bit of a finicky diet. So, but you get on fine. And she's comes across from all of them. They're all very enthusiastic about their mission, and they're all very curious. So she makes a point of asking you about your species and, what do you call yourselves, and, blah, 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 blah. And you again, as Kev rightly says, you've trained for this. You've probably all done this at one point or another. You are open. You are chatty, but you're also not giving away. Oh, by the way, this is where the defense center for Earth is located. You just obviously you treat them as friendly but a bit standoffish, because at this point you don't want to share too much information. So, for example, you don't tell them that there is a large, Federation starbase less than, I don't know, a few days travel distance.
Yeah.
Which to them would probably take 2 or 3 weeks to get to Narendra Station from here if their warp drive was operating at full efficiency. But that's still pretty close. So you don't tell them that. You just say you're explorers, and we're part of the Federation, and this is what we do, and blah 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 blah. And that all seems perfectly acceptable. So just to be clear, so she tells you in the course of their conversation that they come from the planet called Setu. So they refer to themselves as the Akaru, but their the home planet is called Setu. It's a Class M planet, and it's, according to them, it's approximately 3 days away from here at warp 5, which is their maximum speed. So as Giara rightly estimated, this ship is essentially it's a warp 5 engine. So warp 5 is their top speed, and it would probably took it took them about a week to get here. And she tells you that they'd simply come to this system because their their sort of telescopes and their long range probes had picked up strange energy readings from here, which and again, as you lot know from your dealings with the Expanse, that's all over the place. But they've explored other star systems, but obviously this is the first contact they've made with non-Akaru. So she counts herself very lucky that she's the first of her race to have this encounter. And as she says, they detected what seemed to be structures on the moon, so that's why they sent the shuttle down, and that's when they were hit by the gravimetric disturbance, which, as she said, had cost them the lives of 20 of their crew. The total crew is 74. 20 were killed, and as I say, they have many, or they have a significant percentage were wounded. But as I say, within the hour, Plume and his people managed to get most of them back on their feet.
Okay.
And that's kind of most of the information that she sort of dumps on you in the course of your couple of hours of having.
As I say, she's just going to be as cautious about.
I'm sure. I mean, again, they seem genuinely open. You don't get suspicious vibes from them. Again, you as Starfleet officers have obviously dealt with these situations before, so to the best of your knowledge, and Osterhagen again with his observing of the Akaru, again, you seem that they seem to be genuinely quite open. They're all curious, enthusiastic.
I get a sense of danger from them. There's not an overwhelming sense of danger.
Not at all. No, quite the opposite. In fact, they're quite gregarious and they're quite open, and they're quite happy to talk. If you engage them in kind of pointed questions, they're quite happy to.
Giara can sort of like get a look at their engine.
Sure,
not necessarily for.
Oh yeah, she's got a very close look at that. She's probably up to her elbows in it at the moment. Got all the panels off it, and So what does he want her to look for, Mike?
It was just more sort of like so we get a rough idea of how their tech works, and if there's any necessarily improvements, but any advice that we could give them. I mean, let's face it, Prime Directive's out the window because these guys are space traveling now.
So what Giara finds is the engine is efficient for its design, but again, as we said, it's a Warp 5 engine, but it within those parameters, it's quite well it's well put together. Giara, you also think you've also come to the conclusion that actually this ship is actually very well designed. You suspect that a similar Starfleet vessel of the time probably would have been probably 30%, would have needed probably 30% more crew and resources, because this ship's actually been quite efficiently designed. So again, given all that we said about the age, the Warp 5 engine and its kind of, but its actual design parameters, you're actually quite impressed. You've seen other civilizations with early warp technology that are not as sort of attractive, if you like, or efficient as these. I mean, most of the early Earth warp ships were quite ugly looking things. And most species have, these kind of ships in their past that were kind of functional, but they weren't, they didn't do anything with any sort of design ethic other than.
I don't come across anything sort of anachronistic that seems out of place for if they've developed only this far. They shouldn't.
Not really. As I say, the only thing that you would consider to be anachronistic is a good thing. In that, as I say, you're very familiar with obviously warp engines and the technology, and again they've applied it in a quite efficient way. So it just suggests that their kind of approach to things is quite elegant. And again, the ship, although it's functional, but it is kind of cleverly designed, and there are certain things you think, that's a good solution to that problem. And so, but nothing that strikes you as being also, nothing that you would go, oh my god, this looks, how they shouldn't have this technology. It's just simply that it seems to have been designed very well. And as I say, you're quite able to poke about pretty much wherever you want. You find out, Giara, from talking to the
Carl.
Carl. Carl. So he tells you that basically the Star Ward was only launched about 2 years ago. The species are very new to space travel, and the Star Ward was the first sort of explorer that was built, and it's only been in space for 2 years. And this is their first contact, which again, is probably bad luck on their part that they haven't run across. They could have run across the that they could have run across Romulans or something by now. Yeah.
So in all of this, is there any indication that was it doppelgangers? No, what were the shapeshifters?
Changelings.
Oh,
100% not. 100%. And in fact, Plume he's obviously taken blood samples and all that because he's had to, in doing triage and in doing surgery in some cases. Absolutely not, because he's had he's been into the kind of innards of some of these people trying to fix blood vessels and all that kind of thing. So no, there's absolutely not. Okay, right, Jara, I want you to make. I need you to make an engineering roll for me, please. So can you do a? I guess insight and engineering. It won't be assisted by the ship, because obviously you're just working on this with your own stuff, not your ship exactly.
Okay, do I have a focus for whatever it is we're doing?
Have you got warp? You've got warp drive, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
A focus of warp drive. So that would apply. So just make sure you tick the focus option.
Task roll 1.
Difficulty 1, yeah. So just roll 2 dice and just tell me what you get. Oh, perfect. Okay, so 2 successes. So this is actually a difficulty 1 task. So okay, as you're kind of up to your, as we said, you've been up to your elbows in this technology. You've been sort of in the guts of the warp drive. And one thing that as you're poking around in the innards, and again you've got into the power distribution system, you notice that as you start pulling stuff apart, when you get down into the guts of it, you come across the base level power transfer relays, and you notice that they are they've actually got they transfer energy, and there's like this kind of blue kind of strip of energy that is apparent when power is being transferred through them. And as you look at this and you go, do you know what, that looks really familiar. And as you think about it, you realise that what it reminds you of is the power conduits that you came across on the Candidate 3 planet. So you remember when you were investigating when you were dealing with the assessor, and you were on the planet's surface, and all of the power was being routed through these kind of power conduits built into the ground that have this sort of blue energy flowing through them. And as this occurs to you, and you look at these more closely, you realise that they really do remind you of the power relays that you saw on the Candidate 3 planet, but obviously in miniature. And they obviously are a cruder version of them. And there's nothing inherently sinister about them, and they're doing the job they're supposed to do. But it seems odd to you that these things look very much like the Tilikal power network. And this is odd enough to strike you. So in other words, I mention it because you go, that's what it reminds you of. And as you look more closely at it, you think, you know what, those power relays look a bit like the columns that were on the Tilikal planet, but obviously in miniature. These are obviously like, millimeters long, if you like, built into the power relay system. But the similarity is there for sure. And you once you spot it, you go, do you know what? You can see that influence or that kind of base technology is there, built into their systems.
Do I have any way of relaying this back to the rest of the team without the crew of the ship that we're fixing hearing me?
You can easily report back, because basically, you're working on repairs, and you can just get one of your people, get McHugh. Alice McHugh comes over, and you say, "Oh, Alice, just can you just carry on patching this up?" And you sort of show her the schematic and say, "Look, can you just? I'm going to report to the commander." And Cal stays in engineering, and you're quite able to go wandering off back to the. You head back up to the runabout, and I guess you probably would just Giara to Kaz. Just say you want to report in, basically.
I wouldn't have been party to all of the conversations that were going on, but I just wanted to report back that I've discovered some similarities between some of the systems, the power strips on this ship, and things that we've seen in the Tilikal power network. And it just struck me as a bit odd, because we are supposedly the first from the extraterrestrial to them people that they've had contact with. So it just struck me as a bit odd.
Interesting. I spotted, Lieutenant. Find out what you be discreet, but get as much readings and find out what you can about them.
Yeah.
About the system.
Fair enough. And more not too long after, Plume kind of reports into you, and he comes back, and he looks a bit as usual. He's got his sleeves rolled up. He's not smoking a fag though, because that would be rude on someone else's ship. Because if you remember, that's one of his things, isn't he? He has like a kind of herbal cigarette or something. I think they were herbal. They might not. Karen's not here to correct me. But
herbal.
Anyway, he sort of turns up. He turns up, and he's got his trademark sleeves rolled up, and he's looking a little bit more dishevelled than usual. And he sort of comes to find you, and again, as you're in this briefing room, and there's like a buffet, and he sort of wanders over to the table, and he's like picking up some of this. He sort of sniffs some of the food, like helps himself to some food, and just gets a drink of this of a glass of juice, and he just says, he says, "Commander, I just wanted to report. We've managed to stabilise all of the Akaru casualties that we were presented with. Mostly concussive injuries, broken bones. We had a couple with internal bleeding, but they've all been stabilised. And I've handed care back to the Akaru medical personnel who are perfectly capable. Basic report on biology. I'm sure the lieutenant, and he sort of points to Osterhagen, has already noticed that the Akaru are obviously mammalian, humanoid. I can confirm that their blood chemistry is copper-based, and that aligns with the obvious similarities between themselves and Vulcans and Romulans. There's obviously I've run a quick DNA analysis, and there is definitely common ancestry between the common ancestry with the Vulcans and the Romulans at some point back in back in time. Not uncommon. We've encountered similar species before with similar characteristics. I'll prepare a full report for the captain, a full physiological report for the captain, and I have full permission from my opposite number here to share that information. And this commander, what the hell? I keep forgetting her name, which is very bad of me. Commander Mouty kind of nods at this, and she says, "No, that's She says, "We have no secrets to keep from you. That's of course more than We're more than happy for that information to be shared." And so Plume says, "Anyway, with your permission, I'll return I'll return my people to the runabout for a bit to have some downtime."
Yeah.
As they've all worked hard for the last few hours, so we'll take a break and then wait for orders. So he kind of trots off with his people in tow, and they go back to the runabout. Just out of interest, I'm presuming you probably left the 2 security guards at the runabout, just sort of just sort of casually making sure that you control access to the runabout, just so that none of the it's up to you if you want to allow people on board the runabout to look about. I mean, there's nothing inherently, secret about it, I guess, but it's up to you. I'm assuming that you keep that as a kind of a protected space, because as you said, if you're going to be transporting equipment backwards and forwards from the Vigilant to this ship, then that would probably be a sensible idea. And that all carries on for a bit, and after a couple more hours, Giara, you report to Osterhagen that you've managed to effect repairs, and that the ship will safely be able to make the trip back to Setu. It will probably take a few days, but you're happy that the ship is able to proceed on its own power. This Commander Mouty speaks to you, Kaz, and she says, "I wish to formally invite you and your crew to accompany us back to Setu, where we can hopefully welcome you as honoured guests, as representatives, as the first representatives of another civilization to have met us, and we would humbly invite you to join us. I'd be more than happy to speak to your captain."
Thank you for the gracious offer. We shall talk with the captain and basically just accept it. But
right. So, well, okay. So what happens is, Jara, you and your people tidy up their gear. You've got everything up and running. You can't do any more at this point, and you kind of all the teams kind of group on the runabout, and Naismith says, "Okay, fine. Bring the runabout back, and we'll have a meeting. We'll have a discussion once you're back on board." And you kind of relay. Do you want to leave the hobnobs, or are you going to take them back with you?
I will leave the hobnobs because I can replicate some more.
You do realise that you might have just given birth to a new religion on Setu, perhaps.
I think I'm willing to be court-martialed for it.
So you're happy to introduce an addictive substance to the life?
Yes, I am.
Into a new civilization.
Absolutely.
Only a hobnob. What harm could it do?
She's now the new hob. knob deep of
That's
SETI.
just what Captain Kirk said on that planet when he left behind when the ship left behind the book on gangsters of the 20th century, right, Mike?
Yeah, they want a bit of our action.
Was it the USS Horizon or whatever it was that left behind the book on? So next thing you know, they're all going to be walking around like biscuit people from McVitie's or something. Anyway, never mind. So you kind of all regroup back on the runabout, and again, everyone's done a bang up job, and again with no interference from the Akaru, you back the runabout out of the shuttle bay and return to the Vigilant. And as you're disembarking, and obviously you're gathering all your gear and everything, and Dr. Plume gets you to go through. There's you run like a medical scan just to double check. You run through like a biofilter, just obviously to make sure that everything is cool. There's no sign of any infections or anything, which all is perfectly clear. And as you report to the briefing room, so he gets Giara and Plume and Osterhagen and Kaz and everyone to report to the briefing room. Oh, hello, who's just dropped out?
Kevin's just thinking about. Everybody's gone quiet.
Oh.
Okay, hold on. Right, can you still hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
guys, you can hear me. Obviously.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Kevin, you still there, mate? Oh, he's disappeared off. He's obviously going to dial back in. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So we'll carry on while we're waiting for him to rejoin us. So basically, you go into the briefing room and so Naismith, says, right, have a seat, everyone. And you get yourself coffees and that from the replicators. And as you're gathering all your bits, Naismith gets a report from the bridge that the shuttle on the planet's surface has lifted off and is returning to dock with the Star Ward. So, he sort of flicks on one of the display switches to an external view, and you see this little shuttle kind of climbing up out the atmosphere, and it goes back and docks with Star Ward. And he says, very well, ladies and gentlemen. So, what are your impressions of the Akaru based upon your interactions with them?
They seem to be a peaceful civilization, same as us. Taking their first steps out into the galaxy. They seem to pose no immediate threat. I found evidence that they are using something similar to the Tilicali power transfer conduits. Anybody still there?
Yeah, still listening.
Right. Yeah, I'm still there.
Yeah. And I would like to. One of the things I wanted to do was. I'm assuming the doctors were able to get the medical team were able to a good physiological reading of them, and I'd like to compare that with the known examples of Tilicali.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
These guys might share technology, and it's just funny. It's sort of like the first thing that we see when we come out is technology that seems to be based around what the Tilicali were using. I mean, what do you think? I mean,
okay, so Naismith sort of takes that on board and he says, okay, so Jerry, just tell me again. I've read your initial report, so just tell me again what you discovered.
I noticed when I was effecting repairs on their engine that some of their power strips were very similar to what we saw on the Candidate 3 planet. They were very similar in appearance and
similar technology.
Very similar technology, not the same in scale, but so similar that I think they may have come from the same source, possibly.
Interesting. So he okay, that's perfect. And so he gets the report from Plume about the physiology. And hello, Osterhagen's back.
Wanted to update everything. Sorry.
That's not a problem. It's all good. It's all good. So we're just having the briefing. So all we've talked about is basically Jara's just reported about the power conduit thing that you heard about. And so Naismith says that obviously Plume has given him a full, or rather Plume gets up and gives like a quick presentation on the biology, and as we've already covered, Vulcanoid or mild Vulcanoid. So in other words, they're not as obviously Vulcanoid as Vulcans and Romulans, but there is shared ancestry, copper-based blood. No obvious enhanced strength, so they're not more like the Romulans in that they don't have, because Vulcans obviously come from a lower gravity, higher gravity planet, so they're stronger. These seem much more within human norms, although they are quite hardy. And again, all the scans he's taken, and he's taken DNA and blood and everything else, and there is no indication of anything that would suggest anything to do with the Tilical or that. Given that you haven't really encountered a physical Tilical, because the only Tilical you've come across have been the kind of other dimensional versions of them, but as far as
they come out, didn't we get them back? On that?
No,
you're right. Sorry, my apologies.
no. God, if we did, then this campaign's going nowhere. Right, that's it, everyone. Thanks. Kevin would be gutted, wouldn't he? Especially. So your scans, basically everything Plume tells you, it all seems to make sense. Again, shared Vulcanoid heritage. Physiologically, there's no sign of anything that sends alarm bells to him. None of it's unusual. It's all pretty much understood. The biology is all understood, all good. And he can tell certain things from looking at their sort of medicals, basically, that it's obviously their planet is not suffering from pollution or anything like that. They're obviously quite healthy. This all says good things about the planets they come from Cetu. There's no indication of that kind of thing going on. And everything, and all of the crew that have interacted with them have all reported about the same sort of thing, that they're all kind of very enthusiastic about first contact, very curious, but also respectful. So nobody has reported any sort of pushing of boundaries or, trying to get information where it's not offered freely, if that makes sense. Yeah. So you don't get the impression that any of them have been snooping or trying to, they're happy to talk about themselves.
They almost seem good to be true.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. In some ways, yeah, you're right. In some ways, you could argue they seem too good to be true. They seem to be, very keen for this to work. They're very happy to have met you all. The technology all seems good. So you're right. In some ways, if there's anything ringing alarm bells, it's almost that they're too good to be true.
We don't actually know anything about them other than what we've just seen. So, but using human interaction, do we get the impression that this is like a child meeting an uncle for the first time and wanting gifts, or is it a bit sneaky? If that makes sense.
No, okay? No, I understand. You get the impression that again, from your observations, you are kind of confident in saying that they seem to be they seem to be what they appear to be. In other words, they are curious. They seem to be quite their society, from what you've seen of it, based upon your interactions and your observations, they seem to be quite efficient. And again, that backs up what Jara said about the engineering thing. But they do seem to be genuinely, as you say, more like the uncle relationship. In other words, they are keen, they are enthusiastic, they are quite open. You're not getting you've not noticed any undercurrent of ulterior motive or threat or kind of facade or hidden motive. So again, being a Vulcan, you look at all these.
I just find it odd that they're not more guarded with us. They can tell that we're more advanced.
Well, yeah.
I just find it odd that they're not more wary.
Again, very good observation. And yes, Osterhagen again bears that out. He says there is, again, and this ties back into the too good to be true in some degree, in that they seem to be almost too trusting of, they've only just met you and they're kind of quite happy for you to take scans of their DNA, blood, and all this. But of course, that in itself doesn't make them suspicious. It just means that from a human perspective and from a perspective of first contacts you've done, again, they seem to be quite keen and sort of like the model pupils. Now, Naismith goes around the room and gets all of this input from you, and he kind of nods along and he says, "Yep." He says, "Okay." He says, "I've taken note of the commander's invitation for us to journey to Setu, and I've consulted with Admiral Herbert briefly, and the Admiral has agreed with me that we should accept the invitation, if only because." As you know, our standing orders are to investigate any indication of Tilikal presence or involvement until we understand the situation with the Tilikal better. And given the commander's report on the engineering systems, and I've seen the schematics and I've seen the scans, and I completely concur that there is too much similarity in that design for it to be a total coincidence. And so the Admiral has agreed with me that we should proceed with caution to accompany them back to their homeworld. We will proceed on a first contact footing. However, I've asked Kalish to maintain tactical readiness. All of our indications are that these people would pose us no threat. So if their vessel was to, if they were to instigate his hostilities with Vigilant, Kalish has done nothing but run tactical simulations for the last several hours, and every scan that she's run, every simulation she's run, suggests that these people are no match for us in a firefight. So we have some confidence there. However, obviously we will proceed with caution, but also with the genuine hope that this might be our first productive contact in the Shackleton Expanse. Remember that these people are the first indigenous civilization that we've met on friendly terms. Obviously, we have met we have met other powers who pose the threat. And I'm thinking specifically of Kerin's group that we came across. But these people seem to be, seem to have the potential to be allies in this region. So, for that reason, and for the reasons of the Tilikal technology, our orders are to accompany the vessel back to its home planet and to gather more information where possible, and then report back. Obviously, I would ask all of you to keep your eyes open.
Vigilant.
Be vigilant, indeed. We have also agreed. I've also agreed with the Admiral that we will allow and we will host the commander and some of her people aboard Vigilant en route if she requests this. We will not make the offer, but if it is requested, then given standard security protocols, we will be again open and welcoming to them, as much as possible. We're not going to treat these people as a hostile force until we have reason to do so, but there are also grounds here for us to proceed with caution. So, do we have any questions before we proceed?
No. Are we going to mention that we know about Tilikal or not? What's the
question?
Because
I
obviously,
think not at the moment.
I'm
Until we know more about their background and culture. We need
yeah.
quiet.
100%, and Naismith nods along, and I agree. Myself and the Admiral concur on this point as well. That
In my head. Yeah.
we will not offer that information at this point. It may simply be that this technology has come to them innocently, and it might be that they have no knowledge of the Tilikal or.
I thought the Tilikal were trapped in that dimension.
Yeah, and have been, as far as we know, trapped there for a long time.
It's possible somebody.
Yeah.
But also, you also know that there are influences. They have an influence in our dimension as well. So Naismith says yes, we will proceed with caution. It says very well. He says I will speak with the commander and accept their invitation, and we will get underway without delay. So please report back to your stations, and we will reconvene. We will have another briefing tomorrow at 0900. And so obviously we can report any further observations at that point. So other than that, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Dismissed. And at that, so he basically trots off to his ready room and he makes the call to the commander and says, "Yes, we're very happy to accept your invitation." And so within the hour, the Star Ward kind of hesitantly at first. You basically, Mike, have plotted give them the course out of the gravimetric. The region of gravimetric distortion, and so yeah, you don't need to do that. They manage to they can manoeuvre quite happily.
Give the algorithm for detecting.
You probably don't want to. I wouldn't have thought at the moment. I mean, you can just simply tell them to follow your course, and you just lead them out essentially. And within a few, you clear the system, and then both ships go to warp. The Star Ward can happily maintain about warp 3.5, and so at that speed it's going to take you about a week to get to Setu, and so the ships both go to warp, and I think that is where we will leave it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. That was very productive. That went very well. Thank you very much for your excellent attention. So before we ramble, I'm just going to say thanks everyone for listening. And we will catch you next time on Starship Vigilant.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Starship Vigilant. Miles Naismith was played by Sean. Kaz was played by Mike. David Osterhagen was played by Kevin. Dr. Plume and Kalish were played by Kerin. Our music is Fanfare for Space by Kevin MacLeod, which is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution license. See you next time.